You step outside on a brutally hot day and immediately begin looking for shade. The walk across a parking lot feels longer than it should. Your shirt sticks to your back. The air has stopped behaving like air and now feels vaguely personal. Then you go indoors. An ancient human had no indoors in the modern sense. No electric fan, no refrigerator, no weather forecast warning that tomorrow would be dangerously hot, as though today had shown admirable restraint. There might be a rock overhang nearby. There might be water. The nearest tree might already be occupied by several relatives and one animal with no intention of negotiating. So what did ancient humans do during extreme heat? A large part of the answer was surprisingly sensible. They stopped moving. Extreme heat becomes dangerous when the body produces or absorbs heat faster than it can release it. Walking, digging, hunting, and carrying food all generate additional heat inside the body. Direct sunlight adds even more from outside. Once core temperature keeps rising, confusion and collapse can follow. The ancient person resting under a tree was not wasting the afternoon. They were reducing heat production. Modern physiological models show that direct sun sharply lowers the amount of activity a person can safely sustain compared with the same air temperature in shade. Modern populations also reduce outdoor activity as temperatures climb, especially once hourly temperatures move beyond roughly 30 to 35 degrees Celsius. The prehistoric version of this response probably required fewer graphs. The sun was unbearable, so people sat down. Daily life could be moved around the hottest part of the day. People could travel early in the morning, work while the ground was still cooler, and rest when the sun became expensive. Activity could resume toward evening. Hunting at night created other problems, including predators with better vision and fewer concerns about workplace safety. So the exact schedule depended on the landscape. Still, time itself became protection. The smartest hour for a journey was often the hour when the sun had not fully started. This kind of scheduling would have mattered because the human body is unusually capable in heat, but its cooling system comes with a serious condition. Humans sweat. We have millions of eccrine sweat glands distributed across the skin. When sweat evaporates, it removes heat from the body. Our reduced body hair makes that evaporation more efficient than it would be through thick fur. These traits allowed humans to remain active in hot environments for longer than many other mammals, especially when air movement and low humidity helped sweat evaporate. This is one reason a human can keep walking in conditions that force many fur-covered animals to pant in the shade. It is also why humans can become dangerously dehydrated. Sweating spends water. A person can have an excellent cooling system and still die when the supply runs out. Human heat adaptation did not remove the need for water. It made access to water even more important because our most effective cooling mechanism depends on losing it through the skin. Ancient people living in hot regions therefore built movement around dependable water. One of the clearest examples comes from Oldupai Gorge in Tanzania. Recent archaeological and environmental research suggests that Homo erectus repeatedly occupied a semi-desert landscape there around 1 million years ago. They concentrated around river environments and other ecological focal points where water and resources remained available. These were not modern humans carrying advanced desert equipment. They were earlier members of our genus, using the geography of water to make an extreme landscape survivable. The river was more than somewhere to drink. It attracted animals. It supported edible plants. Trees and vegetation offered shade. Cooler ground and moving air could create a more manageable local climate. A person leaving that corridor entered a landscape where every kilometer had to be measured against the return journey. Later human groups living in northern Arabia followed seasonal water across the desert. Archaeological research suggests that communities near the end of the Pleistocene moved along routes connecting temporary lakes and water sources. Monumental rock carvings appear near some of these routes and may have helped mark access to water across an otherwise difficult landscape. The desert was not crossed as one enormous act of courage. It was crossed from water to water. That knowledge had to be remembered precisely. A pool might exist after seasonal rain and disappear weeks later. A spring might survive one drought and fail during the next. Someone had to know which source lasted longest, which route offered shade, and how much water was needed before turning back. An elder who remembered a distant spring was carrying infrastructure inside their head. The group also needed to recognize when the heat was becoming dangerous. Thirst arrives after water loss has already begun. A person growing dizzy, weak, unusually irritable, or confused could no longer be trusted to make excellent decisions about navigation. This is one reason traveling together mattered. Other people could notice the change before the affected person did. Heat has a particularly unpleasant habit of damaging the organ needed to understand that the heat is damaging you. A group could share water, reduce the load someone carried, stop in shade, or abandon the day's plan. The hunt could be attempted later. A person who collapsed far from camp could not. Children and older adults would have required more care. Modern heat models show that aging reduces the level of activity that can be sustained safely, partly because sweat production and cardiovascular responses become less effective. Ancient communities did not know the physiology, but they could observe who struggled first. Extreme heat turned survival into a social problem. The group could move only as fast as the people most vulnerable to the conditions, unless it was willing to leave them behind. People who lived in hot climates also became physiologically acclimatized. Repeated heat exposure can expand blood plasma volume, reduce strain on the heart, and improve the sweating response. The body begins sweating earlier and can distribute sweat more effectively across the skin. These changes develop over repeated exposures rather than through one heroic afternoon under the sun. Ancient people raised in hot environments would have carried these adaptations naturally through daily life. A visitor arriving from a cooler region would not. This may have made local knowledge and local bodies equally important. A route considered manageable by one group could overwhelm newcomers. The newcomers might understand where they were going and still underestimate what the journey would do to them. Acclimatization also had limits. The body cannot adapt its way out of every combination of temperature, humidity, sunlight, and physical work. Humid air prevents sweat from evaporating efficiently. In very dry heat, sweat can evaporate well, but the body may lose water faster than it can replace it. Modern models suggest that dangerous limits vary greatly, depending on age, activity, shade, and humidity. This helps explain why shelter mattered, even when it provided no air conditioning. A cave entrance, tree canopy, rock wall, or quickly built shade structure could block direct solar radiation. That knowledge had to be remembered precisely. A pool might exist after seasonal rain and disappear weeks later. A spring might survive one drought and fail during the next. Someone had to know which source lasted longest, which route offered shade, and how much water was needed before turning back. A shelter positioned to catch airflow could improve evaporation. Thick rock and earth warmed more slowly than exposed ground, creating cooler places during the day. Ancient shade did not need to be comfortable. It only needed to be less hostile than the sun. Once clothing became more developed, covering the body could also help in hot, exposed landscapes. Bare skin allows sweat to evaporate, but it also receives direct solar radiation and ultraviolet exposure. Loose garments can shade the skin while allowing air to move underneath. A well-known experiment on traditional Bedouin robes found that a black robe absorbed more solar heat than a white one, yet the additional heat was dissipated before reaching the wearer's skin. The loose space between cloth and body mattered more than the color alone. This does not mean every prehistoric person wandered through the desert wearing an expertly ventilated robe. Clothing rarely survives for archaeologists to inspect, and hot weather garments varied enormously. It does show that covering up in extreme heat is not as foolish as it looks from inside an air-conditioned building. Food choices could help reduce heat exposure as well. People did not have to hunt every day if dried food, gathered plants, or stored resources were available. A group with reserves could remain near water during the hottest period rather than traveling because dinner had become urgent. Heat made planning valuable. A failed hunt in mild weather meant hunger. A failed hunt at the wrong time of day could mean hunger, dehydration, and the discovery that the return journey was much longer than remembered. Eventually, settled societies built more elaborate heat defenses. Houses gained thick walls, courtyards, small openings, and shaded working spaces. Communities developed wells, cisterns, irrigation, and storage systems that reduced the need to chase seasonal water constantly. But the basic principles stayed the same. Avoid direct sun, reduce activity, stay near water, move when conditions are tolerable, build shelter around airflow and shade. These sound obvious now because humans spent thousands of generations learning them. The people who ignored those rules were less available to teach the next generation. That is the part modern life hides. We tend to imagine ancient humans defeating hostile environments through toughness. Toughness helped, but stubbornly walking under a midday sun is not an advanced survival strategy. The people who survived extreme heat were probably good at retreating, waiting, remembering water, and deciding that today's journey could become tomorrow's problem. Human beings did not conquer heat. They negotiated with it. They worked in the hours it allowed. They followed the water it left behind. They used shade as technology and stillness as protection. Their bodies adapted, while their culture supplied the rules the body could not invent alone. Today, heat disappears when a machine turns on. Ancient humans had to notice every change in wind, shadow, thirst, and distance. The most important skill was knowing when to move. The second was knowing when movement had become a bad idea. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, subscribe for more. See you in the next one.